Open your phone and load a website hosted on the other side of the planet. It feels like the data just appears, out of the air, beamed down from a satellite, pulled from something we like to call the cloud. But there is no cloud. When your message crosses an ocean, it does not go up. It goes down to the cold, dark floor of the sea. Almost everything you send between continents travels through physical cables lying on the seabed. Not some of it, about 99% of it. Right now, there are more than 500 of these cables stitched across the ocean floor, roughly 1.5 million kilometers of cable in total. That is enough to wrap around the Earth more than 30 times. The entire internet between continents rests on a bundle of wires you will never see. For years, people blamed sharks. The story went that sharks were biting through the cables and knocking out the internet. It is a great story. It is also mostly a myth. Fish bites barely register in the records. What actually breaks these cables is far more ordinary. Fishing boats dragging gear along the bottom, and ships dropping anchor in the wrong place. The most fragile thing on the seafloor is undone by a hook and a chain. To understand how we got here, go back to the year 1858. Back then, a message from London to New York traveled by ship. It took about 10 days. One American businessman, Cyrus Field, became obsessed with a wild idea. Lay a single telegraph cable across the entire Atlantic Ocean and make those 10 days collapse into minutes. Almost everyone told him it was impossible. The ocean in the middle was 3 kilometers deep, and nobody had ever laid anything across it. No single ship could carry a cable that long. So they used 2. An American warship, the Niagara, and a British one, the Agamemnon. Each carried half the cable. They would sail to the middle of the ocean, splice their 2 halves together, and then steam apart in opposite directions, paying the cable out behind them as they went. And it kept going wrong. The cable snapped after 3 miles. It snapped again. It snapped a third time 200 miles out and vanished into the deep. And then, in August, it worked. For the first time in history, the 2 sides of the Atlantic were connected by wire. Queen Victoria sent a message of congratulations to the American president. It was just 98 words long. And it took about 16 hours to crawl across the ocean. 16 hours for a single, short note. The signal arriving on the far side was so faint that operators had to strain to read it at all. The cable was a sensation. There were fireworks and parades. But it was sick, and one man finished it off. An engineer named Wildman Whitehouse decided the signal was too slow, so he forced enormous voltages down the line to push it faster. Instead, he burned through the cable's insulation. Within weeks, the connection went dead. The miracle of the age was a lump of useless copper on the seabed. It took 8 more years. In 1866, the largest ship in the world, the Great Eastern, finally laid a cable that stayed alive. This time it held. Suddenly, a message between continents took minutes, not days. The world had been rewired. And every cable on the ocean floor today is a descendant of that one stubborn line. For a century, those cables carried copper and electricity. In 1956, the first telephone cable across the Atlantic could carry just 36 phone calls at once. Then, in 1988, everything changed. The first fiber optic cable crossed an ocean. We stopped sending electricity down metal and started sending light down glass. And light changes everything. Here's the trick that makes it all work. The cable's core is a thread of pure glass, thinner than a human hair. Shine a light into one end at a shallow angle and something beautiful happens. The light hits the glass wall and bounces back in. It cannot escape, so it ricochets down the inside of the fiber, bouncing thousands of times a second, racing along a tube of glass for thousands of kilometers. We call it total internal reflection. But light alone is not information, so we flicker it. Switch the light on, and that is a 1. Switch it off, and that is a 0. On, off, off, billions of times every second. Your photo, your message, this very sentence become a frantic stutter of light pulses flashing down a glass thread under 3 kilometers of seawater. There is a problem. Over distance, the light fades. By a few hundred kilometers, it would be too dim to read. So buried in the cable, every 50 to 100 kilometers, sits a device called a repeater. It grabs the weak, fading light and amplifies it, the light itself, without ever turning it back into electricity. Picture a chain of these, thousands of them, sitting silently in the dark across an entire ocean, catching the light and throwing it onward. And we do not send just one color of light. We send many at once, dozens of different wavelengths down the same fiber, each carrying its own separate stream of data, side by side, not interfering. Stack all of that together, and a single modern cable can carry hundreds of trillions of bits every second. So think about the leap. 1858, 98 words, 16 hours. Today, hundreds of trillions of bits every single second through one thread of glass. The same ocean, the same distance, and a difference so enormous it is hard to even picture. For all that power, the system is shockingly delicate. When a cable breaks, a ship sails out, drops a hook on a long line, and drags the seabed until it snags the cable, sometimes from kilometers down. It hauls the broken ends up to the deck, splices in a new piece, and lowers it back into the dark. And because everything flows through these lines, people have always wanted to listen in. During the Cold War, an American submarine crept into Soviet waters and wrapped a recording device around an undersea cable, quietly copying a rival's secrets off the ocean floor. So the next time something loads from the other side of the world, picture what actually happened. Your words turned into pulses of light. They dove off a beach into a glass thread thinner than a hair and shot along the black ocean floor, caught and thrown forward by a chain of repeaters in the dark. And they crossed an entire ocean in a few hundredths of a second. The internet isn't in the cloud. It's at the bottom of the sea.